You're listening to Podcast Radio Hour with me, Stuart Ross, and our guest this week, the actor, comedian, and of course podcaster in his own right, Alex Lowe. Alex, let's turn our attention to your podcast now, The Angelos and Barry Show. For those who aren't familiar with them, who are Angelos and Barry?
Well, Angelos Epithemiou is played by Dan Skinner. You might remember him from Shooting Stars on BBC Two. He had his own show on Channel 4. And we hooked up some years ago, just sort of working together on various things. And then we did a radio programme on the internet. And where I play my character Barry from Watford, which I've done on Steve Wright's show on Radio 2 for a number of years, and I had a series on Radio 4. And Angelos is a sort of hapless, lonely chap, and Barry is an 82-year-old cockney who talks a bit like that. So between the two of them is quite a funny sound. You know, if we've got no material, at least the voices sound funny.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you for doing the voice. I wasn't going to put you on the spot and say, do you mind doing the voice, Alex? But you did. Thank you very much. I mean, we talked a little bit at the beginning of the programme about the Angelos and Barry show. Yeah. You said there is a sort of crossover maybe with the Derek and Clive recordings of Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. Would it be fair to say that Angelos and Barry are sort of a couple of comic grotesques, and the humour can be quite full on? I mean, it's obviously funny, but I mean, is that fair to say?
Full on is a phrase you could use. Vulgar, puerile, The Guardian called it, but The Guardian called it a puerile delight, I'm happy to say. So yes, I mean, it's really it can be quite base, but you know, we have a lot of people who listen to it and enjoy it, and we went out on tour and they want to hear some of our sort of in-jokes and catchphrases from the podcast. So I sort of think we can't be going too far wrong. If people enjoy it, they enjoy it. I'm sometimes repeat bits for my kids, my teenage kids, who just, you know, curl up with embarrassment. But I mean, it's completely improvised, and when I say completely improvised, it really is. I would rather prepare a bit more, but Dan is of the opinion that the gold comes from segueing into things that you weren't expecting to segue into. And when we do our live shows, which we also record as a podcast, you know, I mean, the temptation with a sea of faces looking at you is that you prepare more. But if you've just got the courage of your convictions and you improvise for, you know, what turns out to be an hour and a half cut down into an hour, then that's when you get the gold.
Well, let's hear a bit of that gold now. This is the Angelos and Barry Show in its undiluted form, courtesy of Great Big Owl.
I don't know whether you saw this in the Daily Mail.
What is it?
3D print a prototype eyeball bionic eye. Yeah. I can't get to a job interview. I ain't got no transport.
Yeah,
you know?
I know.
That was the Angelos and Barry Show podcast, featuring our studio guest here today on Podcast Radio Hour, Alex Lowe, in the guise of Barry from Watford. And of course, alongside Barry from Watford is Angelos Epithemiou, played by Dan Skinner. That was a fairly clean clip.
Yes. How did you find that?
hours of research. I mean, the obvious thing with doing a podcast, I guess, is enjoying the creative freedom, maybe, and lack of censorship that comes with it. Do you enjoy that, Alex?
Very much so. I mean, I think both Dan and I, we've written stuff, and you know, I've had stuff on Radio 4 and Radio 2. It's so lovely not to go and have a meeting about a meeting about a meeting, to meet the producer, have another meeting, and then 6 months later it comes to nothing. It's lovely to just kind of set up our laptops in his house quite often and just start the tape rolling. I mean, we honestly don't. I mean, we don't edit very much, mainly because we're such Luddites. We don't actually know how to use the equipment. So, it's lovely to just kind of be creative. It's like a jam session, I suppose, is the closest I can think. You know, it's just off the top of our heads, and that creative freedom, as you say, it's thrilling.
You don't have any sort of form of producer looking over your shoulder then at all, saying you can't say that, or we're going to have to lose that later on?
We have had that in the past, and then sometimes Dan will stop me halfway through by drawing his finger over his neck, like we'll have to stop that, and that's sort of libelous. But in the main, I think we're quite good at steering the right side of decency, I hope.
And it's a real sort of passion project for you both, because obviously you do lots of other things as well. Yeah,
I mean, we really love it. We have an absolute ball. We've got a gig coming up in the next couple of weeks that we're really looking forward to. So yes, it is. It's just like, I mean, I think about Peter Cook when he used to phone up LBC, as the Norwegian fisherman,
right,
to Clive Bull's show, and I just think you can't stop if you are a sort of creative person, or at least an egotist. You can't stop. You can't stop yourself from producing stuff. I mean. And it's all the other things that are put in your way that prevent that, meetings, as I say, or you're not the flavour of the month. If you can literally go and put it out there, then you're going to do that.
I mean, on that note, then, if it's so easy, is maybe the wrong word, but it's something you can do without too much work, how long do you think the both of you will continue making it for?
Well, we are going to increase our output.
Right. Okay.
We did it. We were producing them sort of every other week, I think, when we started, and we had a huge following. And then work commitments meant that we couldn't do quite as much, and it dropped off a bit. So we're back. We're with Great Big Owl, and we're going to try and produce more podcasts. So we're we still love it, and people seem to still enjoy it. So why not?
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for telling us about the Angelos and Barry Show podcast.